If you're getting ready to start the CPA exam, one of the first questions you'll run into is which section to take first. It seems like a small decision, but it actually affects how the rest of your exam timeline plays out. This video breaks down what each section actually involves, how they overlap, and the order I'd recommend, based on how the exam is structured. Once you pass your first section, the clock starts. You have an 18-month rolling window to pass the remaining 3 sections before your first score expires. That window is generous, but it's not unlimited, and the order you take sections in can either work with that timeline or work against it. Some sections share foundational content, which means taking them closer together can reinforce what you've already learned instead of losing it to time. There's also a momentum factor that doesn't get talked about enough. Starting with the hardest section while your energy and motivation are highest is a different strategy than easing in, and both have real trade-offs depending on the person. Here's a quick breakdown of what you're actually choosing between. FAR, Financial Accounting and Reporting, covers the broadest range of content and is generally considered the hardest section by most candidates. It's foundational, meaning a lot of what you learn here shows up conceptually in other sections. Audit, Auditing, and Attestation covers audit-specific content. It's a moderate difficulty section with some conceptual overlap with FAR, since auditing financial statements requires understanding how those statements are built. Regulation covers tax and business law. It's dense, but it leans more toward memorization than the conceptual reasoning FAR requires. Then there's the discipline section, where you choose one of 3 options, BAR, ISC, or TCP, based on your specialization or interest. This section is more specialized and often aligns with the type of work you're doing or planning to do. The overlap between sections is worth paying attention to, because it can work in your favor if you sequence things right. FAR and Audit share some foundational financial reporting concepts. Understanding how financial statements are built in FAR makes it easier to understand what you're auditing in Audit. Reg has some overlap with certain discipline sections depending on which one you choose, particularly if you're leaning toward TCP given the tax content overlap. The practical implication is that if you wait too long between sections that share content, you lose some of that natural reinforcement. Studying FAR, taking a 6-month break, then starting Audit, means you're relearning some foundational material instead of building on it. Based on how the exam is structured and how the content overlaps, here's the order I generally recommend. Start with FAR. It's the broadest and generally hardest section, and tackling it first means you're working with the most foundational knowledge while it's freshest, especially if you're coming directly from your accounting coursework. Take Audit second. While the financial reporting concepts from FAR are still fresh enough to reinforce what you're learning about auditing those same concepts. Reg third. It's dense but different in nature from the first 2. More memorization focused, which works well as a change of pace after 2 more conceptually heavy sections. Save your discipline section for last and choose it based on where your career is heading rather than which one sounds easiest. By that point, you'll also have more exam experience under your belt, which helps with a section that's inherently more specialized. That said, the right order for you depends somewhat on your specific situation. If you're a recent grad, starting with FAR while your academic knowledge is strongest makes a lot of sense. You're closer to the material than you'll ever be again. If you're already working full-time while studying, some people prefer starting with their weakest section first, while they still have the most energy and flexibility in their schedule to dedicate extra time to it. If you're already working in a specific area, say tax or a specialization that maps to one of the discipline sections, that section may come more naturally to you and could make sense earlier rather than saving it for last. The 18-month clock should factor into your sequencing too. If your life circumstances mean you'll have less available study time later in your timeline, front-load the sections that require the most study hours. There's no universally perfect order here. What I laid out is a strong default based on content overlap and general difficulty, but it's not a rule you have to follow exactly. What matters more than the specific sequence is picking an order and committing to a realistic study schedule around it. Overthinking this decision can cost you more time than any theoretical advantage you'd gain from picking the optimal sequence. Consistency in your study habits matters more than which section comes first. That's the breakdown of CPA exam order and how I think through sequencing your sections. If you want more on the CPA exam process and getting into Big 4, more videos are below. Subscribe if this was useful.